have you ever paused to truly consider the profound weight behind those two simple words? I am. It's arguably the most fundamental statement we can make about ourselves. Yet, what if the deepest, most transformative truths about who we are, even about what we conceive of as God, are not hidden away in some inaccessible realm, but are woven into this very declaration, perhaps veiled by a paradox that challenges our most ingrained assumptions?
It's a question that has echoed through the corridors of human thought for millennia, hasn't it? From ancient sages right up to modern philosophers, the very bedrock of identity, of existence itself, really pivots on how we begin to answer that.
It really does.
And as the incredible source material we're diving into today reveals, the answer might be far more intricate, liberating, and expansive than our everyday understanding typically allows. It really beckons us to look beyond the surface of what seems, obvious.
You've set the stage perfectly. So, welcome everyone to the deep dive. Today, we're not just scratching the surface, we're taking a journey deep into profound philosophical poetry and its accompanying commentary. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the very nature of self, the divine, and the fundamental fabric of reality, all through the lens of non-dual thought. We'll be drawing deeply from the ancient wisdom of the Upanishads and the luminous, heart-centered insights of Sufi mysticism.
A rich combination.
Definitely. And the core of our exploration will be to uncover how a poet grapples with the declaration, I am God, distinguishing between what might initially sound like an egoic lie, a statement of profound arrogance, and what ultimately reveals itself to be an undeniable truth that resonates with the very fabric of existence itself. It's about peeling back layers of misconception.
Exactly. And our primary source material for this rich exploration comes from excerpts from Non-Dual Truth, God, Self, and the Logos. Specifically, we'll be dissecting Oscar Muñoz's insightful commentary on his own poem 5 from the collection Alborada, along with fragments of another related poem. This collection of writings offers a truly unique and powerful perspective on consciousness, identity, and the fundamental nature of reality, seamlessly blending ancient wisdom with a contemporary poetic sensibility that makes these profound ideas remarkably accessible. It's a bridge between worlds, really.
A bridge. I like that. Okay, let's unpack this right away then. The poet doesn't ease us in at all. He begins poem 5 with a direct, almost confrontational statement. He writes, "If I were to say of myself that I am a god, I would be lying knowingly."
Wow. Yeah, straight in. When you first hear those lines, what immediately comes to your mind? If someone were to walk into a room and declare, I am a god, well, for most of us, it wouldn't conjure images of spiritual enlightenment, would it?
Not at all. It screams arrogance, maybe delusion, a huge ego trip.
Right, exactly. Immense arrogance, delusion, perhaps a profound lack of self-awareness. It sounds like the ultimate ego trip, a declaration from a place of inflated self-importance, a claim of personal singular divinity that feels fundamentally separated from the rest of existence, almost to the point of exclusion.
It absolutely does. It feels like a falsehood because it's asserting a personal individual divinity that somehow positions that I above or apart from everything else. It's an I that wants to elevate itself, to be special and distinct in a hierarchical way. It's the kind of statement that makes us instinctively recoil.
Precisely. And Muñoz's commentary illuminates this perfectly by connecting these opening lines directly to a profound and ancient yearning found in the Upanishads, that venerable collection of philosophical texts central to Hinduism.
Ah, the Upanishads.
Yes. The yearning is powerfully expressed in the famous mantra, Asatoma Satgamaya, which translates roughly to, from the unreal, lead me to the real.
Okay, Asatoma, Satgamaya, from the unreal to the real. So if Asat represents the unreal, the falsehood, the illusion, and Sat is the real, the fundamental truth, the ultimate existence, how does saying I am a god tie into this concept of the unreal, the Asat? It feels like more than just, telling a fib.
Oh, it's far more than that. This lie, as the poet calls it, isn't merely a moral falsehood, not something intended to deceive others in a conventional sense. Muñoz explains it as a profound, almost like a game of reactive will.
A game of reactive will, yeah.
Think of it this way. Even in the shadow of ignorance and inertia, even when we are deeply unconscious of our true nature, this lie is somehow an expression of the force of love. It points to what he calls the psychic being, or the soul.
Okay.
But in a state where it is deeply identified or sort of entangled with the limitations of human volition, emotion, and intellect. So it's not purely negative. It's the soul, constrained by our human faculties, attempting to assert its divine nature, but doing it from a place of profound misunderstanding.
That's a truly fascinating twist. So it's a lie, yes, but it's still driven by something fundamental, something inherently good trying to connect, even if it's currently misdirected or distorted by the ego. It's the soul's deep longing, but voiced through a limiting filter.
You've hit on a crucial point there, from this limited perspective.
Yeah.
And here we're talking squarely about the perspective of the ego, our constructed sense of self. The assertion of being a god is indeed a profound falsehood. It is, as Muñoz states, an arrogance of the ego that has not understood its own formation.
Right, it hasn't understood itself.
Exactly. This egoic I feels profoundly separate from the divine, from the true, unified reality. And because it perceives itself as fundamentally distinct and limited, it simply cannot genuinely proclaim itself as a god without being in a state of self-deception, of knowingly lying to itself about its true yet unperceived nature. It's the ego, in its isolated and fractured understanding, making a grand, misguided claim of individual supremacy.
So the core of this lie is deeply rooted in the ego's limited view, its profound feeling of separation. This sounds very much like the illusion of separation that we often discuss in non-dual thought. How does this illusion become so deeply entrenched? It seems so powerful. It's absolutely central. The source explains that this lie, which often becomes the very anchor of our egoic identity in its precariousness, it's not just sustained, but actively perpetuated by this illusion of separation. And here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive.
Okay.
This illusion isn't just a passive state of unawareness. It's deepened and further complicated by the desire for that very separation.
A desire for separation.
Yeah.
That feels so counterproductive if separation is the source of suffering. Why would we want to feel separate, to perpetuate an illusion that seemingly causes us so much pain and limitation?
That's the ego's subtle genius, maybe. Or perhaps its trick, as the commentary later calls it. The ego in its cunning camouflages this desire for separation. It doesn't openly declare, I want to be separate and suffer. No.
Instead, it proudly waves the flag of finitude as the only one that fully represents the human. It convinces us that our limited individual self, our distinct personality, our unique history, our finite form is the only true self. And it champions the idea that embracing our distinctness, or separation from some larger whole, is the ultimate expression of human dignity, strength, and autonomy.
Ah, so it frames limitation as strength, as identity.
Precisely. Think of it like a single droplet of water in the vast, boundless ocean. That droplet might, out of some strange, inherent impulse, believe itself entirely separate from the ocean, clinging fiercely to its individual droplet identity. It might even desire that separation, celebrating its perceived uniqueness, completely unaware that it is intrinsically, fundamentally, and eternally part of the whole ocean. This clinging to finitude, to being a distinct, bounded self, is the core of this desire for separation. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of our true nature.
So that will of shadow you mentioned earlier, that's effectively the ego's stubborn resistance to dissolving back into the whole, preferring its distinct, albeit limited, existence, even if that means suffering. It sounds like self-sabotage on a cosmic scale.
That's a powerful way to put it. This will of shadow isn't merely passive ignorance. It exerts an active, reactive force against the real. It's an act of the mind that actively creates distance and separation, thereby deepening duality.
It builds walls.
Exactly. It's the mind-building conceptual walls where there are none, reinforcing the idea of me versus not me, rather than me as everything. It's the consistent internal narrative that reinforces our perceived isolation. And the source notes that this lie, in its inherent sadness, reflects a consciousness that has not yet transcended the limitation of form.
And how does that sadness, that profound attachment to the lie of separation manifest in our daily lives? What are the practical consequences of being stuck in this deeply rooted illusion? What does it look like for, you and me?
Well, when we are anchored in this lie, when we identify so strongly with our limited form and the illusion of separation, it leads to a cascade of predictable experiences. We become deeply attached to our perceived limitations. Our physical appearance, our personal history, our individual achievements and failures, our roles in society. We define ourselves by these fleeting conditions.
We cling to them.
We cling to them, yes. And this attachment often leads to suffering because our limited form is inherently vulnerable, subject to change, illness, loss, and ultimately death.
Right.
We often feel isolated, constantly striving for external validation, material possessions, or fleeting emotional highs to fill a perceived void that, in reality, doesn't exist.
That restless search.
The restless search, exactly. It's a
Adjective.
continuous, often exhausting pursuit of fleeting satisfactions, which inevitably leads to a profound sense of dissatisfaction and anxiety in that search for something more. This internal sadness isn't just a mood. It's that subtle, persistent ache of being disconnected. It's a whisper from our deeper being, a yearning for the truth that is being denied by the ego.
Like a fundamental disease.
Disease, yes, that's a perfect word. It arises from operating under a false premise about our own nature. We build these elaborate prisons of identity, and then we wonder why we feel confined.
That makes a lot of sense, and it really highlights the existential weight of that initial assertion from the poem. It's a sobering look at our default state. But now, the poem doesn't just leave us in this state of disillusionment, thankfully. It takes a truly profound and liberating turn. After stating the lie so starkly, it immediately pivots to these lines. But if I were to say of myself that I am God, the truth of its existence would be spoken.
Boom. This is where the profound difference, the radical shift in perspective emerges. It's subtle but absolutely monumental. The change from a God to God, just removing that small article A.
Just one letter.
Just one letter. It signifies an individual, separate deity, perhaps one among many, or a self-proclaimed egoic divinity. But when the poet says, I am God, without the article, it completely transforms the statement. It moves it from an egoic boast, from that game of reactive will, into a declaration of non-dual realization. It's the core shift from egoic delusion to a profound alignment with fundamental universal truth.
It's the difference between claiming to own a drop of water and realizing you are the entire ocean.
Beautifully put, yes. So this is clearly no longer the ego speaking. This is something else entirely, a voice from a deeper, more unified level of consciousness. The commentary emphasizes that here, the declaration of divinity no longer comes from the ego, but from the being that has overcome Asat, that unreal, illusory state, and is aligned with Sat, the real. It's a shift from the individual, limited consciousness to a universal, unified consciousness. It's moving beyond the illusion of separation and recognizing an inherent, inseparable connection that was always there, just veiled by our limited perception. This is the authentic I am, not the ego's petty imitation.
And the poem continues to elaborate on this profound shift, delving deeper into this recognition. If from my being I were to speak the being of God, if I were to infer or reveal from my limitation, the limitation of the unlimited that I feel, and that resonates at the bottom of the ego's attempts to want to continue being. Okay, that's a mouthful. But it hints at something incredibly powerful and transformative. What's the key insight in this intricate phrasing? Can we unpack that a bit?
Let's try. What's truly fascinating here is how the very individual limitation, which earlier was the basis for the lie and the ego's perceived boundaries, now paradoxically becomes the very window into the unlimited.
The limitation becomes the window.
Yes. It's not about the ego, this small separate self saying, I, this limited self, am God. That would still be the lie, right?
Right, it's still arrogance.
Instead, it's the deeper true self, recognizing that its individual, seemingly limited form is not separate from God, but rather a manifestation, an expression, a unique vibration of the unlimited. It's like looking at a single wave in the ocean and realizing that the wave is not separate from the ocean, it is the ocean, manifesting as a temporary form. The wave is limited in its form and duration, but its fundamental being is the ocean.
Ah, okay. So the very attempts of the ego to cling to its separate identity, to want to continue being as an isolated entity, those very struggles and limitations, they become a point of resonance for the unlimited. The friction itself becomes a signpost. That's wild.
Precisely. It's quite profound. When this truth is spoken, when this deeper recognition occurs, not just intellectually but experientially, that impulse would show what lies behind the limiting appearance of the ego. And this is where it gets truly transformative. The ego's lies, its deceits, its seemingly malevolent or self-serving behaviors, which seemed so sad, so destructive, and so limiting before, would then be seen in a new light. They would be seen as winks of complicit love, merely the trick of the small magician.
The small magician, I love that metaphor. So the ego isn't an inherently evil entity. It's like a cosmic illusionist performing tricks. But once you see through the trick, once you understand the sleight of hand, its power over you changes completely.
Exactly right. The small magician represents the ego, with all its clever strategies for creating and maintaining the illusion of separation. It builds elaborate narratives about who we are and what we lack, makes us believe in scarcity, isolation, competition,
Well, that's
all that stuff. But once its trick is seen, once we understand that these perceived limitations and egoic struggles are merely a part of the grand cosmic play, a necessary stage in the unfolding of consciousness, its function changes entirely. It's no longer a source of profound suffering that binds us. Instead, its illusory power dissipates, and as the commentary suggests, it can then only follow the path of laughter.
Laughter. That feels like such a profoundly joyful, liberating, and even lighthearted response to something that felt so heavy, so binding, so tragic before. It's a complete inversion of perspective.
It is, truly. This seeing, this deep understanding and recognition leads to the redemption of Ananda. Now, Ananda is a Sanskrit term that encapsulates much more than simple joy or happiness.
Right. It's deeper than happiness.
Much deeper. It is often translated as absolute bliss, spiritual delight, or the pure happiness associated with the ultimate reality in Hindu philosophy. It is the inherent nature of the absolute. So the lie, now understood not as a fundamental flaw or something to be ashamed of, but as a perceived temporary step in the journey of self-realization, becomes a blessed form of lie, all play and love. It transforms into something light, something playful, something ultimately beautiful within the larger divine drama.
That's a truly transformative perspective. It makes me wonder, how does this reframe our understanding of our own mistakes, our egoic struggles, or even those difficult negative emotions we experience in our daily lives? If it's all play and love, does it mean our suffering isn't real or that it doesn't matter? Where's the line?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
It absolutely doesn't mean the suffering isn't experienced in the moment. The pain is real to the limited self, no doubt, but it fundamentally reframes its ultimate nature and purpose.
Okay.
If we can begin to see our mistakes, our perceived failures, and our egoic struggles as the tricks of the small magician, we can approach them with much less self-judgment, less shame, and more curiosity, maybe. Instead of being trapped by them, endlessly looping in cycles of regret or self-blame, we can learn from them, understanding that they are part of a larger, evolving consciousness that is seeking to realize its true nature.
So less judgment, more learning.
Exactly. Even negative emotions, anger, fear, sadness, jealousy, when viewed from this higher perspective, can be seen as pointers, as impulses guiding us back towards alignment with the real, rather than as purely destructive forces we need to eradicate. They become those winks of complicit love, not something to suppress or deny, but signals that guide us back to the inherent joy and truth of our being.
Like a compass needle swinging back.
A compass needle, yes. This allows for a profound sense of acceptance, not resignation, mind you, but acceptance, and it opens a path toward liberation from the binding nature of those experiences. We begin to see them as intricate, sometimes painful, but ultimately purposeful parts of the divine play, nudging us toward deeper realization. It's an invitation to shift from victimhood to active participation in our own liberation.
That's an incredibly profound and liberating way to look at the messiness of human experience.
Right.
Really practical, too. And it brings us so powerfully to the culmination of the poem, that final, striking line, transparent in the rhythm of speech. This seems to tie everything together, bridging the inner realization with outer expression.
Indeed, this line is the pinnacle of the poem, pointing directly to the manifestation of this profound non-dual truth. It refers to the expression of the logos, which is speech, or vak in Sanskrit. It's about how this ultimate realization moves from being purely internal to becoming a living, breathing reality in the world.
Okay, let's break those terms down a little further, as they're both rich with meaning. Logos, in particular, has deep philosophical and theological roots across many traditions, right?
Absolutely. In philosophy and theology, logos often signifies divine reason, the underlying principle of the universe, or the divine word through which creation itself unfolds. It's seen as the inherent order, intelligence, and meaning within existence, the very structure of reality.
The structure of reality itself. Wow.
And vak in Sanskrit refers specifically to the power of speech, the creative word, or primal sound. It's not just human language. It's seen as the fundamental energy through which reality is expressed, becomes manifest, and is given form. In some traditions, vak is seen as the very matrix of all existence, the unmanifest becoming manifest through sound.
So it's not just an internal, silent realization of I am God, but that realization actually becomes transparent, becomes manifest through speech, through our very utterance. Is that the idea?
Precisely. The source commentary highlights deep resonances in the Christian tradition. For example, in the Gospel of John, where it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." This word is the logos, the creative principle.
Okay, I see the parallel.
Similarly, the ancient Upanishadic tradition, the speech of the rishi, the ancient seer or sage, expresses a universal rhythm. His mantra, his sacred utterance, is described as transparency in reality. This means his words aren't just sounds, not just human constructs. They are a direct, clear, unclouded expression of ultimate truth. The very act of speaking, when aligned with this deeper realization, becomes a window into the real.
So it's not just any speech then, but a specific kind of speech, one that is aligned with the real, with the sat. Is that why our everyday chatter often feels so far from this transparency? Because it's usually coming from the ego.
That's a crucial distinction, yes. While Vak is the general form in which the threads of the masks of any speech are woven, meaning it's the fundamental medium for all communication, from idle gossip to profound poetry, the source notes that not all forms of Vak facilitate transparency. Most of our daily speech is filtered through the ego, through our limitations, and often reinforces the illusion of separation.
Right.
It's when speech aligns with the real, when it emanates from that place of non-dual realization, that it becomes transparent. At that point, the existence of God, the ultimate truth, doesn't just remain a concept. It becomes transparent as logos, as this divine principle, this creative word, living and breathing through the utterance. The very act of communication becomes an act of revealing the divine.
And it goes even deeper, suggesting that its being also becomes transparent in my being as a single stellar pulse, like the cycles of the universe's breathing and speech. This is truly poetic, almost cosmic imagery. What does it mean for God's being to become transparent in my being?
This signifies the ultimate integration. The realization of I am God, this non-dual truth we've been exploring, doesn't just remain an abstract internal understanding or a philosophical concept. It manifests. It becomes transparent, visible, and expressible through the individual's very being, particularly through their speech, their vayak.
So it lives through us.
It lives through us. It's a profound merging where the divine logos isn't just an external or universal principle, but it literally breathes and pulsates within the individual. Your individual being, your unique existence becomes a clear, unblemished vehicle for the universe's breath, a single clear resonance of the divine, like a star whose light shines clearly, revealing the cosmos through its very existence. It's the ultimate integration of the individual and the cosmic, expressed through the fundamental creative act of communication. Your very words, your very presence, become a conduit for the universal truth.
That's incredibly powerful, a truly elevated vision of what human expression can be. And speaking of profound integrations, the commentary introduces another key influence, a celebrated Sufi mystic named Bayezid Bastami, and something about higher dimensions. How does his perspective weave into this tapestry of meaning?
Yes, this adds another really rich layer. Simultaneously, Muñoz notes that on this plane of meaning, there exists in my thinking, feeling, and in my volition, the plane of Bastami, with which it forms a space of higher dimension. This immediately suggests that the intellectual and poetic understanding we've discussed, the logic of non-duality, is not merely an abstract concept. It is interwoven with a deeply felt, profound spiritual experience. It's a space where thought, emotion, and will merge.
Thinking, feeling, and volition all together. And the commentary specifically mentions a long poem inspired by Bastami's Ishkrik. What exactly is Ish in this context? I know it's important in Sufism.
Oh, Ish is profoundly crucial in Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam, and it's distinct from mere love. It refers to an intense, passionate, all-consuming divine love. It's an overwhelming spiritual longing for, and eventually, union with God.
More than longing, it's like a fire.
A fire, exactly.
Sure.
It's not just intellectual assent or even emotional affection. It's an all-consuming spiritual fervor that can completely transform an individual. So the inclusion of Bastami in his Ishq here is vital. It indicates that the non-dual truth explored in the poem isn't just an abstract philosophical idea to be understood by the mind.
Right, it's not just head stuff.
Not just head stuff at all. It is intimately connected with the profound, embodied experience of love, spiritual yearning, and ultimate union that transcends purely intellectual understanding. It's love as a force of absolute connection, dissolving all barriers.
And this leads us to an even more abstract, yet utterly fascinating concept that the author introduces to describe this interconnectedness, moving us from the poetic to the mathematical, almost. He says, "In my aesthetic experience, the semantic space of poetry has an underlying space of a very general type, a topological space in which the epistemological intuition of separate points is not applicable." Okay, that sounds incredibly complex. Could you simplify topological space and this idea of epistemological intuition for us?
Let's absolutely break that down because it's a brilliant conceptual leap, even if it sounds intimidating. Topology is a branch of mathematics concerned with the properties of geometric objects that are preserved under continuous deformations, things like stretching, twisting, or bending, but not tearing or glowing. Think of it as studying how things are connected or grouped together, rather than their exact shape or size.
Okay, so connections, not shapes. And semantic space of poetry.
That refers to the universe of meanings, connections, feelings, and unstated implications that a poem creates. It's the invisible architecture that holds all the meaning together, allowing seemingly disparate ideas to resonate with each other, creating a coherent whole.
Okay, so the meanings within a poem have a kind of underlying flexible structure that connects them. Got it.
Exactly. And the author suggests the structure is a topological space where our usual epistemological intuition of separate points is not applicable. Now, epistemological intuition just means how we normally think we know things, how our minds naturally perceive and categorize reality.
Which is usually by separating things out.
Exactly. Our usual intuition, how we come to know things, inherently assumes distinct points or ideas. We perceive separate words, separate concepts, separate I's and gods. We distinguish between one thought and the next, one emotion and another. But the poet is saying that in the deep, underlying, fundamental space of poetic meaning, and by extension reality itself, this separation simply isn't valid. Those distinctions break down.
They dissolve.
They dissolve. The commentary goes on to specify it as a non-Hausdorffian topological space. This is a key technical detail, but the implication is profoundly spiritual. In a standard topological space called a Hausdorff space, distinct points have distinct neighborhoods. Imagine you have two separate dots on a page. You can always draw a small, separate circle around each one so that those circles don't overlap. They are truly distinct. That's a Hausdorff space. Distinct points can be perfectly separated and identified individually.
Okay, so Hausdorff means separable. So if it's non-Hausdorffian, what does that imply about the nature of reality or meaning at this fundamental level?
It implies the exact opposite, that points cannot be perfectly separated. They're always intertwined, overlapping, and blurring into each other. Imagine trying to separate two very close thoughts or feelings, only to find they're inextricably linked, merging seamlessly.
Like the ripples in water example again.
Exactly like the ripples. You can't isolate them as distinct entities because they inherently merge and influence each other instantly. In a non-Hausdorffian space, any neighborhood you try to draw around one point will always, inevitably, overlap with a neighborhood around another, no matter how small you try to make them. This means that distinction of identity, of clearly saying this is one and that is another, becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, at a fundamental level.
So it's a sophisticated mathematical way of describing utter, absolute interconnectedness, where clear boundaries simply don't exist as we usually perceive them. The very concept of separate points breaks down. Mind-bending.
It is mind-bending, precisely. The author even offers an alternative, a very fine, trivial topology that barely allows for distinctions of identity. A trivial topology is one where the only open sets, think of these as the fundamental components or neighborhoods of this space, are the empty set and the entire space itself. This means all points are essentially connected and indistinguishable within that framework. A very fine trivial topology would mean it's just barely able to make any distinctions at all, emphasizing the profound unity.
Wow, okay. And how does this abstract mathematical concept connect back to the core theme of non-duality and our initial declaration, I am God? What's the so what here for understanding the poem?
It illustrates the very essence of non-dual truth in a powerfully abstract yet precise way. Non-duality posits that there is ultimately no fundamental separation between self and God, between observer and observed, or between any two phenomena. They are all expressions of a single, underlying, unified reality.
Right.
This non-Hausdorffian space is a sophisticated metaphor, a conceptual tool, to describe a reality where the I and God, or any two seemingly distinct entities, don't merely merge at some distant point, but are seen as never truly separate to begin with. It provides a framework where our usual epistemological intuition of distinctness simply breaks down, reflecting the radical unity that non-dual philosophies proclaim. It's saying our minds want to divide and label, but the underlying reality simply is an undivided whole.
That's a truly mind-bending way to think about it. It pushes us far beyond our ordinary perceptions. And the source says these elements, the first poem, the Upanishadic verses, and fragments of a second poem, form a dynamic matrix of meaning interwoven with liminal resonances. We've explored the dynamic matrix, but what exactly are these liminal resonances? That sounds evocative.
Liminal refers to a threshold, a boundary, a transitional space. Think of the liminal space as being just on the edge, at the very threshold of perception or understanding. So liminal resonances are echoes or vibrations that occur at this very edge.
Like on the verge of understanding something.
Exactly. They are subtle, almost imperceptible hints or intuitions that suggest deeper connections, meanings, or truths that are just beyond our immediate conscious grasp. They're like faint overtones in music that hint at harmonies beyond the main melody, or the feeling that there's more to a conversation than just the words being spoken. These are the subtle, intuitive pulls that draw us towards understanding the interconnected web of meaning underlying all these different poetic, philosophical, and mystical expressions. They are the whispers of profound truth that invite us deeper.
So it's like a whisper of profound connections, just beyond our immediate cognitive reach, a feeling that there's a deeper truth beckoning us. This rich complexity leads us beautifully into the second poem, which challenges us even further by taking on a profoundly interrogative and paradoxical nature. It starts by voicing what I think is the natural human skepticism, the immediate logical objection to anything we've discussed so far. How can someone say of themselves that they are God in a body, a single one? How does anyone dare to proclaim the unconditioned, the eternal, the unlimited from a personality that is a painful condition, a sharp limit, and death?
Yeah, this part of the poem, as you say, voices the ego's perfectly legitimate confusion, its resistance, and its very rational objections. It's the logical, immediate argument that arises from our conditioned perspective.
It's what most people would think, right?
Absolutely. From the viewpoint of a limited human personality, one bound by a physical body, subject to pain, profound limitation, and inevitably mortality claiming to be the unconditioned, the eternal, the unlimited, seems not just preposterous, but frankly absurd. It highlights the undeniable apparent contradiction between our finite, suffering human experience and the concept of an infinite divine being. This is the human mind grappling with its own perceived boundaries, its own undeniable experience of limitation.
It's the voice of our everyday experience, isn't it? The one that tells us, look, I'm just a human being. I get sick. I feel fear. I suffer. I'm going to die. How could I possibly be this infinite, eternal, limitless God? It feels like an undeniable, self-evident truth to our conditioned minds.
Absolutely. It's the deeply relatable sentiment, expressing the profound, almost inescapable belief in our inherent separation and limitation. For most of us, this is our lived reality. However, this is precisely where the poem becomes so brilliant, so challenging. It then dramatically flips the question.
The turn.
The turn. It doesn't just challenge the statement of being God, but challenges the very assumption of separation itself.
And how can anyone say of themselves that they are not God? What is not God?
This is the profound, almost dizzying turn. If the first part of the poem expresses the ego's resistance and valid human doubt, these lines utterly challenge the very premise of denying divinity. It's a rhetorical question, yes, but one that forces us to stop and fundamentally confront our assumptions about what isn't God.
Right. If God is infinite.
If God, as the ultimate reality, as the unconditioned, the eternal, the unlimited, is truly omnipresent and all-encompassing, if it is the fundamental ground of being, then what could possibly exist outside of that? What corner of reality, what aspect of existence could genuinely be considered not God? The poem forces us to re-examine our very definitions.
It's like saying, if God is everything and is everywhere, then how could I be the only thing that isn't God? Or how could anything be excluded from that totality? That's quite the logical and existential leap. It feels like it breaks the mind's ability to compartmentalize.
Precisely. It forces a radical reevaluation of the definition of God itself. If God is understood not as a separate entity, but as the unlimited, the eternal, the fundamental essence that drives everywhere until it becomes consciousness, the very animating force of all existence, then the poem challenges the audacity of a limited mind to make a summary judgment about the scope, about the radiant nature of this all-pervasive reality.
It flips the whole thing.
It flips the earlier lie of I am a God on its head, suggesting that the real lie, the true and pervasive delusion, might actually be in denying one's fundamental, inseparable connection to the divine totality. It's saying the more significant error isn't claiming too much, but maybe claiming too little for your true nature.
So it's not a question of claiming to be God in an exclusive egoic sense, but rather questioning the very possibility of not being God if God is truly everything. That's powerful. And this profound, unanswerable question culminates in the final lines of the poem fragment, which bring it all together, unifying the individual with the universal. How could I not be God? How could I be something other than everything else, than this love that lives and dies me?
This line is the ultimate culmination, isn't it? The powerful crescendo, a direct rhetorical question that reinforces the non-dual truth with absolute conviction and experiential depth. Is no longer a philosophical argument, but a direct realization stated as a question.
It feels final somehow.
It does. If everything is God, If the ultimate reality is truly all-encompassing, and if love that lives and dies me, this pervasive divine love, the ishq we discussed earlier from Bastami, is not just an emotion, but the very animating force of existence that breathes life into us, sustains us, and ultimately integrates us back into the whole upon physical death, then how could I, this individual being, be separate from that totality? The poem asserts it is simply impossible.
The connection between the individual I, everything else, and this love is crucial here. It's not just an abstract philosophical concept to be grasped by the intellect, but a deeply felt experiential one, echoing that Sufi longing, the ish.
Absolutely. This is the ish from Bastami, the divine love that permeates, animates, and constitutes all existence. It's the very essence of what lives us, moves us, and ultimately, upon the dissolution of form, integrates us back into the whole. The I is not merely an observer of this love or a recipient of it, but an inherent, inseparable expression of it. It's a profound realization that dissolves all perceived boundaries and reveals that the individual self is not an isolated, separate entity, but a dynamic, interwoven, and essential part of the boundless, loving, divine consciousness that is everything.
There is no other.
There's no other, no separation. There is only this one ultimate reality, and you are not merely in it, you are it, expressing itself uniquely in this moment.
Wow. What an incredible journey we've taken through these profound verses and their commentary. It's really quite something. From the ego's initial, isolated, and ultimately false claim of I am a god, which the poet so clearly labels a knowing lie. We've traveled through the profound Upanishadic yearning for the real, understanding how the ego's persistent struggles and the illusion of separation are ultimately just the playful trick of the small magician.
Seeing the trick.
Seeing the trick. Then we move to the profound, liberating shift where I am God becomes an undeniable truth, not from arrogance, but from a deep alignment with the real, a truth that manifests and becomes transparent in the rhythm of speech, the very logos itself breathing through us.
And we expanded that understanding by weaving in the luminous, heart-centered Sufi dimension, particularly Bastami's concept of ish, divine love, as the very fuel of this realization. We even explored the mind-bending, almost paradoxical idea of non-Hausdorfian topological spaces.
Still wrapping my head around that one.
Me too, sometimes. But it illustrates the deep inherent interconnectedness where distinct identities blur and merge, revealing an underlying unity beyond our usual intellectual grasp. And finally, that second poem brought us full circle, not just asking how one could possibly claim I am God, but then challenging the very notion of how one could not be God.
The flip.
Ultimately revealing that the true lie, the most pervasive illusion, might be in denying our fundamental, inseparable unity with everything.
So what does this all mean for us here in our everyday lives, for you listening? This understanding of the small magician, of the ego's clever tricks, and the pervasive illusion of separation can truly transform our daily experience of self, our sense of purpose, and our connection to the world around us.
Definitely.
If your ego's struggles, your perceived mistakes, and even your moments of suffering are ultimately just winks of complicit love, part of a larger divine play, how does that fundamentally change how you approach your own challenges, your relationships, and your path forward?
It invites us to view our lives not as a battle against an external and different world or even against ourselves, but as an unfolding, dynamic dance within a singular, unified reality. If seeing yourself as part of everything else, as a transparent, living, breathing expression of this love that lives and dies you, changes your perspective, well then what lies about separation might you unknowingly be holding on to in your own life?
Yeah, what are those hidden assumptions?
What deeply ingrained beliefs about your limitations, your separateness, or your unworthiness might be just another persistent trick of the small magician, waiting to be seen through, waiting for that laughter, that ananda?
And perhaps most importantly, if the deepest truths in our existence is that we are transparent expressions of the real, of the logos of God, what new truth is waiting to be spoken through you? Not from egoic desire, not from that old lie, but transparently in the rhythm of your own being, in alignment with the real.
That's the real question, isn't it?
It is. We hope this deep dive has given you much to ponder, much to feel, and perhaps a profoundly fresh perspective on the most fundamental question of all, who you truly are. Until next time, keep diving deep into the mysteries of existence.